The stable door was already closed when Eli Mercer stepped inside, and for one terrible second he thought he might have been the one who shut it. Now imagine this for a moment. You walk into a quiet place, you expect to see horses, hay dust, nothing unusual, but instead, you find something that changes you forever. Because what Eli found that afternoon in Kansas didn't just start a fight, it started a war between law and truth. So before we go any further, tell me in the comments, what would you do? Would you follow the law, or break it to save someone? The air inside the stable was heavy and still, the kind of heat that presses against your skin and makes every breath feel slow. Sunlight cut through the cracks in the wooden boards, thin and sharp like knives. Dust floated in those beams, drifting without sound. Then Eli saw her. She was sitting in the straw, knees pulled tightly to her chest, shoulders hunched forward as if trying to disappear into herself. The shirt she wore was torn and filthy, hanging loose from one shoulder. When Eli's shadow crossed the floor and touched her bare legs, she flinched so hard it made his chest tighten. It was the reaction of someone who had learned that shadows meant pain. Eli stopped where he stood. He removed his hat slowly, careful, deliberate. He lowered himself just a little, keeping distance so she wouldn't feel cornered. That was when he noticed the door latch. It had been fastened from the outside. He looked again, slower this time. The iron ring bolted into the wall. The short length of chain lying in the straw. The marks around her wrists faded in some places, dark and fresh in others. She tried to speak. No sound came. She swallowed and tried again. "My father," the words were cracked and dry. Her eyes shifted toward a wooden post beside her. Eli followed her gaze. 3 shallow cuts had been carved into the wood, even deliberate, not random, morning, midday, night. She didn't cry. "He drinks," she whispered. Then he locks the door. The heat inside the stable suddenly felt unbearable. Eli Mercer had known Silas Whitfield for years, a small horse trader with a loud laugh and a reputation that smelled of whiskey and bad cards. Silas had always said his daughter was sick, said she wandered, said she needed control. But this was not sickness. This was cruelty. Her name was Clara Whitfield, 18 years old enough to know her own mind, old enough to know fear when it came, and she watched Eli the way a trapped animal watches a man holding the rope, waiting, judging, hoping, outside. Boots crunched on gravel. Silas Whitfield was coming back from the well, and in that moment, Eli knew his life had split in two. If he walked away, nothing would change. If he stayed, everything would. He remembered another time, years ago, a neighbor, a drunk husband, a woman who had asked for help. Eli had said it was not his business. She had not lived long after that. He had never forgiven himself. The stable door opened. Silas stood there, bucket in hand. He smiled, but it was a thin, dangerous smile. "She gets dramatic in the heat," he said casually. "Always had a wild streak." Eli didn't answer. He stepped just enough to block the view inside. "She's locked in," Silas shrugged. "She runs. I keep her close. That's raising a child." Clara said nothing. Eli spoke calm, steady. "I'll take the bay gelding, and I'll hire her to help with the drive back to my ranch. I'll pay fair." Silas's eyes hardened. "She ain't for hire, she ain't property." The words landed heavy. Silas lunged. The first punch hit Eli's shoulder. The second never came. Eli grabbed his shirt and drove him back into the wall. The stable shook. Horses kicked. Dust exploded into the air. Silas fought wild. Eli fought controlled. One hit to the ribs. One shove. One moment of balance lost. Clara moved. It was not heroic. It was survival. She threw straw into her father's face. Eli grabbed the key from the nail and unlocked the stall. He stepped between them. "If I hear you touched her again," he said quietly, "I won't come alone next time." Minutes later, they were gone. Clara sat beside him, wrapped in a canvas coat. She did not look back. But behind them, Silas Whitfield watched, and he smiled, because he had already decided to fight with something more dangerous than fists. The law. So if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time, because what happens next will test not just courage but truth itself. They crossed the river before sunset. At the ranch, Eli gave her water, food, space, silence. That first evening, Clara stiffened as the sun lowered. Her breathing changed. Her hands trembled. It was one of the hours. Instead of asking, Eli handed her a bucket. "Help me." They worked. They kept moving. And when the moment passed without pain, something small changed in her eyes. The next morning, Eli rode to town. The sheriff listened carefully. Silas filed a complaint. He said, "Says you kidnapped his daughter. Paper instead of fists. Blood instead of bruises." When Eli returned, Clara stood watching the horizon. "He won't stop," she said. She was right. Dust rose. 3 riders, Silas and 2 men. They stopped in the yard. You've got something of mine, Silas called. She's not yours. The fight came fast. Dust, breath, rage, Clara shouted. Strong, clear, and that changed everything. When Silas lay bleeding, he muttered, she signed it. Silence. Signed what? Land. Her mother's land. The next day, the deed lay on the sheriff's desk. Did you sign freely? He asked. Clara lifted her chin. No. 1 word. That word spread across the county like fire. Silas was taken. The deed was stopped. And for the first time in years, Clara slept through the night without counting marks in the dark. Now listen carefully, because this is the part that matters most. Sometimes the law is not enough. Sometimes courage is the only thing that changes a life. So let me ask you one more time, what are you still afraid of? What silence are you protecting? What would change if today you said 1 word? If this story stayed with you, like the video, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from and what time it is there, because every voice matters, and sometimes 1 word is enough.